contestant is Allison Coffin. What's your science story? What's your science story, Allison Coffin?
Do you take drugs to lower your cholesterol? Do you not have measles right now? And if you do, door's back there. Do you, or never mind, someone you know, try Viagra to enhance your relationships? Or do you just enjoy a cold beer? If you answered yes to any of these questions, then you, or that person you know, has benefited from science. Madam Contest, Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and honored guests. What's your science story? We all have them. We are walking science stories. Sometimes that story is obvious, like surviving cancer, or experimenting with the latest yeast for your home brew. But most of the time, our science stories are invisible. Discoveries that happened 50 years ago, benefiting us today. But we don't know those stories. It's those scientific moments of a scientist just following their curiosity, seeing where it leads, that lead to the breakthroughs in things like human health and welfare that we enjoy today. I'd like to share with you one of those stories. As we heard in the previous session in here, there are stories that can change the world. This is one of them. It's the discovery of GFP, green fluorescent protein. Back in the 1960s, Osamu Shimomura was studying the crystal jellyfish. It's this beautiful translucent jellyfish. It looks kind of like a crystal chandelier, found here in the Pacific Northwest. Shimomura noticed that when he shone a light on the jellyfish, it glowed green, and he wanted to know why. Now, I don't exactly know how the story went down of the actual discovery, but I have a few guesses. Shimomura and his colleagues were working at the Friday Harbor Labs in the Pacific Northwest here. And I've always imagined that one night, been a long day in the lab, they had a few drinks, and somebody said, what happens if we take this light and we shine it off the dock and we see what we see? Now, I have no idea if that's actually how the story went down, but having been a scientist at the Friday Harbor Labs, with a drink and a light and a dock, it's at least plausible. Regardless of the origin story, the discovery of GFP has transformed biomedical research. Discoveries in a jellyfish, protecting human health. Thanks to GFP, cancer researchers can now see cancer cells glowing and test new drugs to try to stop the spread of tumors so that no one else has to lose friends to a devastating disease. Thanks to GFP, neuroscientists can look at the brains of animals that have Alzheimer's disease to test new drugs to prevent the devastating memory loss. Thanks to GFP, in my research lab at Washington State University, we can study hearing and try to prevent hearing loss. In my lab, we study tiny zebrafish. They're the size of an eyelash, little babies. And they have hearing cells on the outside of their bodies, just like the hearing cells that we have in our ears. And in this case, these fish have been engineered so that their cells make GFP. They glow green. We can then expose the fish to noise. It's basically like the fish equivalent of a rock concert. And we can then put the fish under the microscope and watch those cells. we can then add new treatments, test drugs, and see if we can prevent those cells from dying. Now, fish are even cooler because unlike us, when they swim out of a rock concert, a few days later, they regain their hearing. Fish can regenerate their hearing, and we can't. So we can also study those green glowing cells, thanks to GFP, and ask, how do fish do that? And how can we harness their fishy tricks to someday do the same thing in us? But I will say for now, we're not there yet. So if you're walking out of the rock concert, be sure your earplugs were already in. Just a little public service announcement. Fundamental science, the quest for knowledge. A scientist wondering, why is this jellyfish glowing? Leading to revolutionary treatments for devastating disease. But science without communication is silent. I'm a researcher and I'm a communicator. I've co-founded Science Talk. It's a science communication organization that empowers and inspires scientists and others to share their communication stories, to share our science stories, and impact the world. You don't need to be a scientist, though, to share your story. I'm looking at a room full of communicators right now, and each of you is a set of walking science stories. What's yours? Is it surviving cancer or gallbladder surgery? Is it experimenting with yeast to try out your latest homebrew? Or is it just enjoying your neighbor's beer? We are walking science stories. Learn yours. Because science without communication is silent. Make some noise.